Coming up on Chapman News, California on fire again, this time just blocks away from Chapman. Trump and Biden crisscross the nation as the clock counts down to November 3rd. Trick-or-treating COVID style, new rules for ghouls and goblins.
From Dodge College of Film and Media Arts, this is Chapman News.
Good afternoon, I'm Melissa Cho in Taipei. The election is just 4 days away and over a third of registered voters have already cast their ballots. There are record new COVID-19 cases and shutdowns around the world, shaking everything from Wall Street to Main Street. But we begin with a story much closer to home. Fueled by explosive Santa Ana winds, a dry climate, and flames out of control, over 90,000 residents evacuated areas of Irvine, Tustin, and Yorba Linda, impacting many in the Chapman community. Nicole Zedek has reports from the Orange Circle. Nicole?
Thank you, Melissa. I'm standing here in the Orange Circle where ash covers the sidewalks. I'm not sure if you can see behind me, but there's also leaves and debris that were blown apart as well. Now, earlier today, although the wind has kind of died down right now, the tents behind me were torn apart. Orange County currently has the worst air quality in the nation. Experts advise to stay indoors and limit any physical exertion until the smoke and ash clears. Monday morning, the Silverado fire sparked just north of Irvine, between Santiago and Silverado Canyon. As thick smoke blanketed the sky, Santa Ana winds upwards of 70 miles per hour caused the fire to spread quickly.
Looked over at one point, I think like my second trip to the car, and the flames were coming over the hill. So we could see the flames. And I was like, yeah, we gotta go.
Over 750 firefighters were dispatched to help. 2 of those firefighters were critically injured with third-degree burns over half of their bodies.
My emotion just kind of switched from like being scared to just being so grateful that there are people out there that are willing to like work for hours on end and put their own lives on the line for us. So
the cause of the fire is still under investigation, but Southern California Edison says one of their power lines may be to blame. As the fire moved inland towards the city of Irvine, over 90,000 residents had to evacuate, not knowing when they would be able to return to their homes.
What happens next? Like just the uncertainty of it was probably the most shaking feeling.
The evacuation zone was 1 block from Chapman's Rinker campus in Irvine, which was shut down. Melanie Tran, a student at the Rinker campus, was one of the evacuees.
Like a lot of students have forgotten books and things at home. So it's kind of a mess. When all my housemates were like, it's not worth it to stay here. You don't want to risk it, they're going to block off the roads eventually. And they did block off the roads. So I'm glad I got out of there.
No homes were destroyed in the Silverado fire, but later in the day, another fire erupted near Yorba Linda. The Blue Ridge fire damaged 10 homes in the city before pushing northwest towards Chino Hills, forcing more evacuations Tuesday morning. In the afternoon, both directions of the 71 closed as flames jumped over the highway. The Blue Ridge fire is not expected to be fully contained until November 11th. Although residents in Orange did not have to evacuate, Chapman's main campus closed for non-essential workers due to poor air quality. The high winds brought up old ash from the Bobcat and El Dorado fires, making it especially hazardous for people to breathe.
The smoke was really bad. I mean, we left our windows closed all day yesterday because it was you walked outside and my eyes got super dry and a little bit of a headache.
Both Chapman's Rinker and main campus are now open, but the fires aren't expected to be fully contained for at least another week. Reporting from Orange, I'm Nicole Zedek for Chapman News.
And how will the fires affect voting? The Orange County Registrar of Voters says that 4 ballot drop boxes were in the mandatory evacuation zone. None of the boxes were damaged by the fires, but if you were forced to evacuate and left your ballot behind, you can request a new one at ocvote.com/replacement. And with just 4 days to go, President Trump and former Vice President Biden are spending the last week crisscrossing the nation, paying particular attention to the battleground states. With more campaign updates is Jasmine Sani.
It's been a frantic week for both candidates. They've held dozens of rallies. President Trump even held some in 3 different states on the same day, with Air Force One in the background. Former Vice President Joe Biden has been more cautious, holding smaller rallies. Lindsay Arabian reports on the campaign trail.
With the election just 4 days away, President Trump and former Vice President Biden, along with their running mates, are busy bringing their closing arguments to swing states, the two approaching their rallies in very different styles. With Biden pushing for masks and social distancing, Trump continues to disregard safety precautions, holding giant in-person rallies. COVID-19 is a major deciding factor in this election, and the two candidates couldn't be more divided on how to handle it.
Right now, it's COVID, 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 no matter what happens. COVID, COVID. No, we're rounding the term. We're rounding that beautiful turn.
The White House now listing the end of the pandemic as an accomplishment for the president, despite nearly 500,000 Americans contracting the virus this week alone, with the worst COVID numbers since the pandemic started last winter. Senator Harris attacking Trump during the campaign in Arizona, claiming he failed the American people.
The President of the United States is also the Commander-in-Chief, who has then as his highest responsibility to concern himself with the health and safety of the American people. And on that count, Donald Trump failed. He failed us. He failed the American people.
On the same day, Vice President Pence criticized Biden's proposed response to the pandemic, claiming he could shut down the country.
Joe Biden talking about shutting down our economy. We're opening up America again.
Biden responded by quoting Chief of Staff Mark Meadows directly.
But this administration has just given up. Over the weekend, the White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows went on television and admitted that they've waved the white flag and declared surrender. He said, quote, "We're not going to control the pandemic," end of quote. The American people deserve so much better than this.
In the final days leading up to the election, both campaigns will be visiting swing states such as Arizona, Michigan, North Carolina, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Florida in an attempt to rake in as many votes as they can. Trump plans to hold 11 rallies in the 48 hours leading up to the election. Biden will be joined by former President Barack Obama at a rally in Florida on Saturday. I'm Lindsay Arabian, reporting for Chapman News.
Thank you, Lindsay. Joe Biden is leading the polls by 9 points ahead of President Trump, but many predict we won't know who will win the election until after November 3rd. Polls show close races between Trump and Biden in key states like Florida, Texas, and Georgia. With mail-in ballots becoming a popular method for voting, only 8 states expect to have at least 98% of unofficial results by noon on November 4th. The timing to call the election will depend on when voters return their ballots and how fast states are to officially count their mailed votes. Although Biden has been ahead of the race since February, Trump may pull another 2016 unexpected victory. And with more on election insights is Dr. Lori Cox-Hahn, a presidency scholar at Chapman University. Dr. Hahn, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, so Chapman News has a couple questions for you. And our first one is that this has been the most unusual campaign in American history. Will it set a precedent for the future of elections and the presidency?
Well, hopefully by 2024, we will no longer be in this pandemic. So we're seeing a lot of things this time that we've just never seen before. Different strategies in terms of campaigning with social distancing and so many people staying at home and, with the exception of all the people that go out to the Trump rallies, I guess, but it really just upended traditional strategies. So I think that this is kind of a once in a lifetime, hopefully anyway, kind of event that we're seeing play out on the campaign trail right now. There's just so much, like I said, there's so much volatility out there right now, and it's hard to predict. And I wouldn't put too much stock in polls because I don't know that, the methodology on polling is accurate right now, reliable, but certainly in the middle of a pandemic, I definitely wouldn't bet too much on what the pollsters are saying right now. So, I mean, the 24-hour news cycle is still dictating so much about what we see, what we hear, what we talk about, but it changes so dramatically. It's hard to even keep up with some of what seemed like really big storylines at the time, and then 2 or 3 days later, it's just we're on to something else.
Yeah, and is there anything else you would like to add in terms of just the unprecedented nature of this 2020 election in comparison to previous elections that you've studied?
Trump is a disruptor in terms of how presidency scholars view him. not only in terms of campaigning, but also just in governing. He's an outsider. Even after he's been in Washington, he's still campaigning as an anti-establishment candidate at a moment when there's still a lot of anxiety within the electorate about establishment Washington, and I don't think the pandemic has really helped that for a lot of people. So, like I said, I'm hoping for a clear result and legitimacy on election night. Whether we get that or not, that just remains to be seen.
And Dr. Hahn, thank you so much for providing us with your insight on the elections, and we look forward to having you back again on Chapman News.
Of course, happy to be here.
And next up, 11 propositions are on the California ballot this election season, but some are getting special attention. Spencer Riley has the breakdown.
The battle over Prop 15 is an intense one. The measure aims to create new rules leading to an increase in taxes for commercial and industry property owners. The revenue is expected to fund public services and schools. Those in support of the proposition call it a balanced reform that closes a loophole in the California tax code which benefits the wealthy, while critics say that the bill will increase the cost of living and make everything we buy more expensive. Prop 16 is about the return to affirmative action. This measure would allow race, ethnicity, and gender to be a factor for government decision-making policies. Supporters say this would increase access to fair wages, jobs, and education, while critics say it could encourage favoritism or discrimination. And Prop 20 tightens restrictions on parole, the measure limiting parole for certain nonviolent criminal activities, including repeat theft. It would also expand DNA testing to require samples from those convicted of theft and domestic violence. Supporters say this prevents early release of human traffickers, while those opposing say that this would bring a lot of expenses at the cost of funding for rehab, education, and mental health services. Prop 22 has drawn a lot of attention, focusing on workplace rules for the gig economy. The measure classifies employees as independent contractors, exempting app-based services like Uber and Postmates from providing employee benefits. This would grant them more flexibility to their working hours and location at the cost of employee benefits such as sick leave or health care. Those in favor say that the measure allows more flexibility to workers' hours, but critics say this comes at the cost of their rights and the measure denies the driver's safety. And Prop 25 hopes to enact a referendum to the current bail system. The measure would eliminate the need to pay for bail, instead assessing inmates based on their risk to the public. Advocates say this is a good replacement for the current system, which favors the wealthy. Opponents, however, argue that the new computer-based system could end up being an expensive alternative. For more information on these propositions and others, visit the California Secretary of State Voter Guide at voterguide.sos.ca.gov. For Chapman News, I'm Spencer Riley.
A reminder that early poll voting starts today and continues until Election Day on Tuesday, November 3rd. And be sure to have your voice heard. That's all for politics this week. I'm Jasmine Sani. Back to you, Melissa.
Thanks, Jasmine. One of the big issues in this campaign has been fringe groups on the right and the left. Biden has accused Trump of racism. The president denies the charge and says he is the least racist person around. With more on how these radical groups are affecting the election is Colette No.
In August of 2017, hundreds of white nationalists gathered in Charlottesville, Virginia, to protest the removal of a Confederate statue from a public park. The Unite the Right rally turned deadly when an Ohio man drove his car into a crowd of counter-protesters, killing one and leaving 19 others injured.
It's the only form of terrorism in our country's history that's been state-sanctioned.
Now, 3 years after the rally, President Trump was asked to disavow these white supremacist groups.
Proud Boys, stand back and stand by.
Instead, President Trump blames Antifa, the left-wing political movement, for inciting violence at protests against racial injustice. Still, Simi says the differences between right and left extremist groups is just that, extreme.
We have a much longer history of right-wing extremism in terms of its role in domestic terrorism. Not to say that left-wing extremism hasn't played a role in terms of domestic terrorism. We saw that especially in the 1970s, for example. And we do see some of that today, but the scale is so different.
Just this month, the militia group Wolverine Watchmen plotted to kidnap Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer due to her coronavirus restrictions. The 13 men were charged with terrorism, conspiracy, and weapons possessions. They discussed taking out Virginia Governor Ralph Northam for similar lockdown orders, too.
Goals really are to create a situation where they're able to take power, whether it's through more mainstream political mechanisms or through kind of an overhaul of system, a full-on revolution.
As for how we can combat these violent hate groups, Simi says,
we need preventative measures in place to really start to try and unroot some of the ideas that are embedded in the white supremacist movement.
He suggests more investment in early education about race, resources for organizations like Life After Hate that help people leave racist groups, and further investigation into hate crimes.
You're starting to see some efforts in that direction, but we still have a long way to go.
Efforts like these will continue until and likely after Election Day. For Chapman News, I'm Colette Now.
Americans hear the catchphrase fake news far too often, a term which President Trump has tweeted over 900 times. But no matter who wins the 2020 election, the fake news phenomenon is here to stay. Jenna Perry has the story.
One conspiracy theory making its way around social media concerns Joe Biden and his son Hunter. The New York Post released emails allegedly detailing that they're accepting illegal payoffs from foreign countries. Most other mainstream media outlets are not reporting the story, citing the lack of evidence. Twitter suspended the tabloid's account to stop the spread of the story before more information came to light. This prompting the Justice Department to advocate for changes to the Communications Decency Act, which protects tech companies from being sued over content posted on their sites. Researchers are unsure if disinformation directly impacts voting, but many, like Chapman professor Stephen Reiner, believe that the real consequence is a divided nation.
So it really was to sort of drive a deeper wedge in American politics. Certainly the impact is to further polarize people. Once you increase the partisan divide, we know that people will tend to believe different things regardless of the evidence and hang on to them.
The investigation into Hunter Biden concluding that while he was working with the Ukrainian energy company, it did not have any effect on U.S. policy. Stories like this may have already worsened the public's trust in U.S. government, but evidence shows the internet is not to blame.
The criticism of the mainstream media is that it continues to cover this story in the old-fashioned way of trying to seek kind of an equivalency between both sides, when in fact the argument goes that one side is really engaged in a very well-orchestrated disinformation campaign.
While Washington elites are known for exaggeration, the Trump campaign's record of disinformation has become so frequent that fact-checkers cannot keep up. The Washington Post even reporting that Trump averages 50 misleading claims a day. Just this month, Trump retweeted a QAnon post alleging that an Osama bin Laden body double was killed during the 2012 raid under the Obama administration. President Trump has even cast doubt on the legitimacy of U.S. elections, leaving many worried about the country's future if he doesn't accept the election results.
And the nightmare scenario, of course, would be that the Electoral College is not yet decided and is going to hang on a few swing states who have not finished counting ballots yet.
Political experts are warning Americans of the dangers that disinformation poses in both the short and long term.
And the result is that we lose our ability to make decisions based upon facts. And if there's not a shared set of facts, then there's really nothing we can do as a democracy. It's probably one of the single most dangerous things going on right now.
In order to avoid misleading information, experts suggest consulting multiple sources. For Chapman News, I'm Jenna Perry.
Thanks, Jenna. FactCheck.org also provides resources on conspiracy theories and fact-checking. The website is a project of the University of Southern California's Annenberg Public Policy Center. And coming up on Chapman News, the worst COVID-19 numbers since the pandemic began. We have your report from Chapman and around the world. And as the pandemic continues, I took a closer look at new family dynamics.
Spending time outdoors has never felt more valuable. Whether it's exploring nature or relaxing in your yard, let's do it responsibly. Before going out, check for closures and fire restrictions. Practice social distancing, even when outside and on the trail. Back at home, if burning yard debris, keep your pile small. And no matter where you are, be sure to properly extinguish any outdoor fire. Drown, stir, drown, feel. We're all in this together. Help keep our safe places safe.
A horrifying incident in France. 3 lives lost after an armed man invaded a church in Nice, France. France facing its 3rd attack in 2 months, prompting the government to be on high alert hours before a nationwide coronavirus lockdown. Authorities have traced the killings to Muslim extremists. And more on grim coronavirus news. This has been the worst week for COVID-19 since the pandemic began. Cases are breaking records not only in the United States but around the world. The global coronavirus cases crossing 44 million this week, with over 1.17 million lives lost. Even after multiple nationwide efforts to curb the spread of COVID-19, Europe is still suffering. France reliving another nationwide lockdown starting last night, despite the 9 p.m. nationwide curfew enacted 2 weeks ago. The lockdown will remain until December 1st at the least. Also declaring a major nationwide shutdown is Germany's Chancellor Angela Merkel. Restaurants, bars, and other non-essential businesses closing their doors for a month starting Monday. Germany seeing double the amount of COVID-19 hospitalizations in the past 10 days. And new anti-COVID-19 restrictions protests, the most recent one gathering around 2,000 demonstrators in Berlin. Unrest also brewing in Italy, hundreds of protesters spread across the country's towns and cities as the government scrambles for a lockdown relief package for affected businesses. And violence taking over demonstrations in Milan, Naples, Turin, and Rome after clashes with the police. But many other demonstrations have been peaceful, with business owners still demanding immediate action from Parliament. And in the US, COVID-19 is shattering previous records for daily case numbers, just yesterday setting another single-day record at 86,000. Adriana Ferrari has more on your national COVID update.
Many sobering pandemic records set this week. National COVID-19 cases are on the rise, with more than 90,000 new cases reported yesterday, a new daily high. That's more than 1 new case every second. In 18 states seeing record high infection rates, the number of cases has now surpassed 9 million. In Florida, doctors are preparing for a second surge, as cases have recently risen to levels not seen since early August. Texas is seeing COVID hospitalization rates rise in 4 major counties, including Dallas. While COVID cases continue to rise in California, the death toll reaches a new low. The Mercury News reports that the death rate in California has not been this low since April. As COVID-19 cases continue to rise across the country, I spoke with our Chapman News medical expert, Dr. Jerica Lamb, about why this is happening.
They are probably tired of staying indoors or observing and practicing the safety precautions that many of us have been espousing and encouraging people to still do so. And so that comes with the fatigue of just staying indoors.
And as cases rise to peak numbers, the stock market hit its lowest point since June, many connecting the slump to the pandemic and the election.
So I think investors in the stock market are very anxious right now and watching the political landscape, as well as what is really going on in our communities, that people are losing their jobs.
Closer to home at Chapman, we maintain a steady number of weekly cases. The COVID-19 dashboard lists 6 cases in campus housing, 5 near the Orange campus, 1 faculty member who has contracted the virus, and no students at the Rinker campus have been affected. To check for weekly campus COVID cases, go to www.cusafelyback.chapman.edu/dashboard or look to Dean Price's weekly newsletters. I'm Adriana Ferrari for Chapman News.
Many young people, myself included, find ourselves living at home with our parents when we're supposed to be adulting. I took a closer look at how family dynamics have changed during the pandemic. Living with your parents as an adult is one taboo that we can certainly throw out the window in 2020. Families have been adapting to new routines now that parents and kids are under the same roof 24/7. While living jointly can bring families closer together, experts say co-living for longer than expected may lead to family fatigue and other social and psychological effects.
Some of those frustrations of being together in the same place and managing that could be, one of the various issues that may be there.
For children, current virtual formats adopted by schools can create an unhealthy environment back home. Along with the loss of independence, many families may face issues already present pre-pandemic: addiction, aggression, and violence. But for most children, staying back home has affected their previous way of living.
I didn't always text people and update them on what I'm doing or where I'm going. I often just did things.
Parents have it hard too.
I have some health, not major health issues, but some health issues like migraines.
Jonathan and Cami Fabricant's sons are staying back home for the semester, meaning more mouths to feed and more laundry while still working.
Semi-grown men in the house and cooking dinners again.
Oh, you were doing that anyway.
And then listening to back talk.
The pandemic has initiated a new set of family challenges, but Dr. Jonathan hopes that we can take advantage of this time to better bond and connect with each other.
What are some things that you may be able to use that maybe you wouldn't necessarily have this time again?
He also reminds us to have an open mind for change.
You're living in these times where flexibility is really a big key.
And something else you can do with your family? Learn about voting. Make sure you and your loved ones are well informed on candidate policies and positions before casting your ballot. Check out on theissues.org to learn more. Coming up, a special treat this Halloween. All you have to do is look up. Hurricane Zeta hit the Gulf Coast this week, tearing apart areas of New Orleans. The Category 2 storm made landfall in Louisiana Wednesday afternoon, bringing winds upwards of 100 miles per hour. Strong winds and heavy rainfall carried east as the storm moved up towards Virginia. Zeta marks the 5th hurricane to hit Louisiana this year. Something happening across the entire country is the full moon tomorrow night. Jules Rector has more.
As the ghouls and goblins come out tomorrow night, there will also be a full moon for the second time in October, making it a blue moon, which only happens every 2.5 years. This moon is extremely rare because a full moon only occurs on Halloween in some time zones every 19 years. However, this year, the full moon will be seen across all time zones in the continental United States, which hasn't happened since 1944. Make sure to take a look up at the moon while you're trick-or-treating and take advantage of this rare occurrence. It won't happen again for a scary long time. And speaking of scary occurrences, let's talk about the hot weather we've been seeing here in SoCal. I think a lot of us thought that when we saw some light showers and wind this week that we'd be getting some fall temperatures, but unfortunately that high of 83 today disagrees. And don't worry though, because tonight we'll be seeing the temperature drop about 20 degrees with a low of 56. But before we get into the rest of our SoCal forecast, let's take a look at what's happening nationally. With my hometown, of course, Miami, we're seeing some light showers and a high of 86. Also along the East Coast, we have some showers in New York with a high of 45. Taking a look at Chicago and Minnesota, they're both at a high of 42. A little too cold for me, but I guess that suits them. And then taking a look more at the West Coast, we're seeing a high of 57 in Seattle, a high of 64 in San Fran, and then taking that temperature up way up, we see Las Vegas with a high of 80, similar to what we're seeing here. And taking a look at our SoCal forecast, we have 73 in Newport, 74 in Laguna, and 75 in San Clemente, so mid-70s along the coast. But looking more inland, we have a high of 79 in Irvine, 81 in Mission Viejo, 75 in San Clemente, and 77 in Westminster. And now taking a look at our 7-day orange forecast. Tomorrow will be looking pretty similar to our highs and lows for today, but Sunday, Monday, and Wednesday may reach as high as 88. Tuesday, we're seeing similar to what we're seeing today, but that leads us into Thursday where we have a high of 90. But don't worry, because at night we have a low of 62, so hopefully we can get a break from that hot weather. That is your weekly look ahead at the weather. I'm Jules Rector. And remember that daylight savings ends this Sunday, so we'll fall back by setting our clocks back 1 hour. I know that I'll definitely be enjoying that extra hour of sleep, so I hope you all will be too. And now with our local and national sports updates, we have Erin Coogan. Erin?
Thanks, Jules. My name is Erin Coogan, and welcome back to another week of the best campus sports show. Let's talk Olympics, the games that unite the world. But as countries continue to see surges of COVID-19 cases, the fate of this year's Olympic Games remain up in the air.
Everything comes down to this moment.
Years of training, months of qualifiers, one dream. With coronavirus cases still on the rise, the prestigious Olympic Games were postponed from this summer to July 2021. Athletes around the world who have earned the opportunity to represent their country in Tokyo's 2020 Olympic Games now crossing their fingers for the chance to go for gold.
My name's Nathaniel Coleman. I am a member of the U.S. Olympic team.
Qualifying for the Games in late 2019, Coleman jumped straight into rigorous training. With just months before his debut on the international stage, he, like the thousands of other Tokyo-bound athletes, had no idea what the next few months had in store.
It was kind of a back thought. There was a lot of mystery surrounding the coronavirus and how serious it would be. I guess I did consider that the Olympics would be postponed, but I was pretty confident that it wouldn't be canceled, so I wasn't too worried. You know, I think they made the right decision, and for me personally, it gave me a chance to relax after a long season of trying to qualify. Lately, I've been climbing more outside in like California area, and I've really been liking the idea of doing like half of my climbing time outside and then half of my climbing time inside. I think mentally it had a beneficial effect for me, and I know that that feeling is shared with a lot of other competitors.
Love to see these athletes making the most of the situation, and I'm so excited to see Nathaniel on Team USA this upcoming summer. And the City of Angels does it again. Back-to-back World Championships, first the Lakers, now the Dodgers taking the MLB World Series title over the Tampa Bay Rays in Game 6 this past Tuesday. This marks the club's 7th World Series win and the first title since 1988.
Dave Roberts. And strike three. Dodgers have won it all in 2020.
Post-game celebration proving to be more controversial than ever as COVID-positive third baseman Justin Turner disregards safety protocol to celebrate with his team. Photographed without a mask, embracing teammates and hoisting the trophy, Turner has exposed many to the virus, and the situation is currently being investigated by the league. Chapman athletes end their second week of no contact, no equipment practices. With 0 reported cases within the athletics program, successful COVID-19 protocol points in the right direction for the reintegration of sports here on campus. And finally, a quick reminder to fill out your ballots and head to the polls. The Staples Center is rewarding fans for completing their civic duty by giving out Lakers stickers and masks to everyone who votes on site. That's all for now. I'm Erin Coogan, and I'll see you next week on the Best Campus Sports Show.
Up next, spooking without spiking case numbers, your safety guide to Halloween. Los Angeles County reversed their ban on trick-or-treating after widespread backlash. Now they softened the ban to a strong recommendation, but is going door-to-door even safe this year? Jules Rector has more.
Halloween is going to look quite different this year. The CDC strongly discourages in-person Halloween events, deeming trick-or-treating, haunted houses, and hayrides as high-risk activities. But this doesn't mean you have to miss out on the fun. The state of California suggests you try safer alternatives such as online costume or pumpkin carving contests, drive-in scary movies, drive-through Halloween displays, or decorating your home and yard. State guidelines also recommend that if you are going door-to-door this year, to trade your scary mask
for a COVID-safe face covering. Data scientist Ashley Wilson is one of the many who decided to reinvent Halloween with her interactive nationwide trick-or-treating map, No Tricks, Just Treats.
We were talking about what COVID meant for our kids at Halloween, and we really felt like it would be great if there was a tool that would tell us what to expect before we took our children out.
Her site has icons to represent houses that are participating in Halloween this year.
The spider means that you plan to pass out your candy as usual. And then ghosts, they're going to have a chute that they deliver candy to you in some kind of interactive experience. There's plenty of ways to be socially distant on Halloween and still have a lot of fun. I think all it really takes is neighborhoods to come together and our kids can have an amazing Halloween.
No matter what your plans are this Halloween, make sure to stay safe, wear a face covering, and avoid areas where keeping 6 feet of distance isn't possible. Reporting from Orange, California, I'm Jules Rector for Chapman News.
With fewer trick-or-treaters on the streets this year, Halloween spending is expected to fall 8% to $8.05 billion, according to the National Retail Federation. While Halloween might not be the same this year, Colette No has more on how to keep you entertained this spooky season.
It's Halloween weekend, but it's time to exchange your bonbons for Bond. I'm Ngo, Colette Ngo. Let's get started. The drama continues over the 25th James Bond film, No Time to Die, with no word on whether it'll come out in theaters or on streaming platforms. Apple, Netflix, and other streaming services are exploring the possibility of acquiring the film for $600 million. Variety reports that MGM lost $30 to $50 million due to the delays, but a decision is yet to be made regarding Daniel Craig's last play as James Bond. And although this year has already felt like a long horror flick, we picked out some of our favorite lesser-known spooky films for you to stream this Halloween. Netflix's 2019 film One Bedroom is bound to give you the creeps, with a horror story of a girl's starter apartment turning into a roach motel. Looking for the monster you've never seen before? Also on Netflix, check out The Ritual, where 4 college pals hike through the Scandinavian wilderness with ancient evil close behind. And if you love the first Conjuring film, you can catch the second on HBO Max. In this sequel, the Warrens find themselves in North London to help a single mother plagued by a supernatural spirit. What's your favorite horror film? Let us know on social media at Chapman News. And more exciting movie news this week as we get a look at the latest Batsuit. Javicia Leslie taking up the mantle on the CW's Batwoman following Ruby Rose's departure. Leslie is the first Black woman to portray a live-action superhero in TV or film. Leslie saying in a statement, "I felt like it was important that viewers could tell by the silhouette that Batwoman was a Black girl. With the form-fitting suit and the beautiful afro, we definitely nailed it." And I'm on a watermelon sugar high after watching Harry Styles' latest music video. Styles dropping the much-awaited video for his single Golden, which already has close to 26 million views. The British singer also encouraged fans to vote, tweeting, "If I could vote in America, I'd vote with kindness." With the election fast approaching, we urge you to cast your vote. We'll be back next week with all the latest in entertainment. I'm Colette Ngo.
2 things to remember: you have 4 days to vote, and don't forget to turn your clocks back this weekend. You can keep up to date with all of our stories by following our social media at Chapman News and by subscribing to our YouTube channel at chapmannews.tv. From Taipei, Taiwan, I'm Melissa Cho. See you next week.